PhD student at the University of Glasgow. And my project, right, this is not what it'll actually be called, because that's really boring. I'm taking suggestions on a postcard for a better title. I'll get there eventually, I've got other things to do. So yeah, my project is primarily concerned with the relationship between theatre and national identity for Scottish women. And I kind of focus on big political moments over that period. So that includes the devolution of the Scottish Parliament, the 2014 independence referendum, Brexit. And I ask basically how women have used theatre as a space to engage with ideas of national identity in these times, and how their political and theatrical activity have intersected. And within this, I'm particularly interested in the role that women play as cultural leaders in Scotland, and how theatre has been a space where women have played a really prominent but often under-acknowledged role. I'm a born and bred Glaswegian, and while there's lots of things that go into inspiring a PhD project, I think that many of the main motivations can actually be encapsulated in this slightly embarrassing childhood photo. Yeah, I know. What happened? That was so cute. So, firstly, this photo was taken in January 1998, which was the year before the devolution of the Scottish Parliament, and I'm roughly 3.5 years old. In my lifetime, Scotland has gone through numerous moments of really significant political change and upheaval, and in many ways I feel a little bit like I've grown up alongside devolved Scotland. And this photo really reminds me of a lot of the personal attachments I have to the issues at the heart of this research. But the other thing that this photo makes me think about are the ways in which Scottish identity is performed on a daily basis. This photo was taken at my nursery's Burns Day celebrations, and within this picture there's lots of examples of what David Macron would call Scotland the brand, which is the multiple iconographies that have come to represent Scotland. So I've got a Highland cow right up in the top there, I've got some tartan, I'm holding a book about clans, it's perfectly posed. Now, all of these are images that have come to be associated with Scotland both on an international level in terms of things like tourism, but also on a more domestic level. And I think probably most of us would agree that our daily lives sadly don't feature that many Highland cows, and most of us maybe only have haggis on Burns night, but for the most part we're collectively willing to accept these icons as part of the public face of Scottish identity. So why does that matter? Jen Harvey argues that national identities are staged and culturally produced. And if we take that into consideration, then the symbols of Scottish heritage take on an importance not just in how we package Scotland as a tourist attraction, but how in this branding of Scotland influences the lived experiences of Scottish people and their experience of national identity. And importantly, one thing David Macron points out about Scotland the brand is that it's very masculine, a lot of it's really gendered. He points out that the image of Tartary was originally a military one, and he talks about the Clydeside icon of the skilled male worker who provided for his women. And I would also say that think about some of the stories from Scottish history of William Wallace, Robert the Bruce, the Battle of Bannockburn. They're all very male dominated, and they're all to do with things like warfare and strength and power and man things, I don't know. So, Macron argues that that neglect of women is not an accident or an unfortunate side effect, but quite fundamental to these representations of Scotland. So when we think about the idea that identities are then staged and culturally produced, it's vital to emphasise that this staging and producing is always relational to existing power dynamics and structural inequality. So the experience of national identity can feel like quite a personal one, where we all have the agency to identify however we like, but the more public-facing element of national identity that creates a narrative for a country's past, present and future is dominated by the powerful forces within that country, and that is often, overwhelmingly, a white, male and upper or middle class voice. And I would argue that in recent history, Scotland has been going through something of a rebranding. In the wake of the independence referendum and Brexit, the SNP have positioned Scotland as a country deeply committed to being a welcoming space for people of all races, sexualities and genders to call home. And in a period where politics has felt quite divisive, at times this approach is quite refreshing. However, despite this ideological commitment to equality and undeniable steps towards reaching this goal, Scotland still has quite far to go. In 2017, there was a report published called Sex and Power, which is a great title, and it was kind of created to demonstrate the extent of this gender inequality. And we found that although 52% of the population in Scotland are women, they only make up 35% of MSPs, 26% of university principals, 20% of museum and gallery directors. There were no women working as CEOs of the top 100 companies or as editors of major newspapers. So given that dominance of masculinity within Scottish culture, it is perhaps unsurprising that Scottish theatre has also been perceived as a male-dominated environment. Many of the accounts of Scottish theatre history focus largely on the contributions of men, such as David Gregg, John McGrath, James Bridie. When we think about significant productions in Scottish theatre, people will often talk about things like Chevy at the Stag and the Black Oil, NTS's Black Watch. Not only are they written by men, but they're also primarily about men. Christine Hamilton published a report in 2016 entitled Where Are the Women?, which found that just 39% of all creative roles in Scotland were occupied by women. That figure is disappointing, and it is important to acknowledge the work that still needs to be done to reach equality within the sector, as well as examining the conditions within the industry that lead to that disparity. However, I am also conscious that by focusing solely on the lack of women in the industry, there's a risk of slightly undermining and ignoring the work of the women who are working in Scottish theatre. The simple answer to Hamilton's question of where are the women is that often they are there in the industry doing great work. So for example, Orla O'Loughlin has just finished a run as the artistic director of the Traverse, and you've got Jemima Levick, who was at Dundee Rep before moving to Stellar Quines, Jackie Wiley, who's obviously at National Theatre of Scotland, and that's just the first few names that pop into my head. So the problem then is twofold. There is an undeniable disparity in the number of women occupying creative roles compared to men, and despite the progress that has been made, there's still a great deal of work to be done. But more than this, there's also a lack of critical space given to the discussion of women's work. I think it's vital that when considering what it means to be a woman making theatre in Scotland, my research focuses not just on the material conditions of performance making that can sometimes make it less accessible, but also on asking why women who are in the industry and who are playing key roles are still overlooked and undermined in the narrative of Scottish theatre history. So with that in mind, my goal for this PhD is that it can work to both challenge inequality, but also to illuminate some of the amazing work that is being done by women in Scottish theatre. And a big part of this for me is about expanding the definition of what we see as being a creative role. We so often fall into a trap of talking about playwrights and actors and directors when we speak about the creative industries, but areas such as producing or about education, community outreach, which play a vital role in our culture, are heavily underrepresented, but are also where women are most prominent. So with that in mind, a part of the methodology for this research is about interviewing women in Scotland about their experiences. So if you are a woman or know a woman who works who has worked or currently works in Scottish theatre in any sense, then chat to me tonight, contact me by email, follow me on my Twitter, just getting all the people in here. I just really want pen pals, just email me anyway. So yeah, a big part of this research is relying on me being able to speak to a really broad cross-section of women. So the more diverse a group, the better. Please do get in touch. I always like making new friends. Thank you.